Heel palm strikes are stupid, and anyone who tells you to do them doesn't know how to fight and wants to see you die. Now, I'm not saying your Krav Maga instructor made up all of their combat history and doesn't know what they're doing, but I'm not saying that. The common rule of thumb is if you don't know how to punch properly with your fist, you should just open your hand and use this soft, spongy part of the bottom part of your palm. Reason being, it's much harder to break your hand when you're doing that. And I will grant that, but I will also grant that you're slicing in more than half the potential power of a closed fist strike by opening it up to do an open palm strike. Not only that, the technique is not quite as easy as people think it is. For one thing, and this should be the most obvious part of this discussion, it's much more natural and much easier to damage another human being by closing your hand into a fist and jamming it into another person's eyeball. Now, with my hand in this shape, I can do a regular standard boxing punch, I can do a hammer fist, I can do this weird Kajukenbo thing. This design was meant to hurt another human being, whereas this was meant to grab onto things. This was meant to help me climb, this was meant to help me pick berries, this was meant to help me pick my nose. What this was not meant to do was help me damage another human being. Now, obviously, if you throw anything hard enough at somebody else, it will hurt. I can take my pinky and swing it full speed at my opponent, and that will probably hurt. But not half as much as a heel palm strike, and not a quarter as much as a closed fist strike. Do you see where I'm going with this? Now, yes, I will grant that it is very difficult to teach a complete beginner how to make a fist, rotate through their body, and throw it at another human being. I'll grant that's pretty difficult. But I don't think the solution to that problem is to just say, open up your hands and go like this 1,000 times. You're not E. Honda. I think the solution here is to practice proper punching mechanics. Now, yes, you might be teaching a women's self-defense seminar, and you might only have 15 minutes to teach them how to strike a potential attacker, in which case, anything's better than nothing, right? I don't know that I agree with that. Because again, the likelihood of doing severe damage to another human being at all when you're untrained is very small. When you slice that percentage down even more by using a low percentage weapon like an open palm strike, I feel like you might actually be doing more harm than good. But again, that doesn't really solve the problem of if I've only got 15 minutes to show someone how to throw a punch, I gotta show them something they'll figure out right away, right? Maybe the right cross is not the answer to that, but the heel palm definitely is the answer to that. Some of you reality-based self-defense nerds might have noticed that my heel palm strike has curved-in fingers, meaning when I make contact with something, my fingers are making contact too. And if I hit it wrong, I'm gonna break them, right? And that's what we're trying to avoid. The thing is, having the ability to pull your fingers back is something you need to train. Oh, so if it's something I need to practice, as in something I'm not gonna master in the first 5 minutes of learning it, then I might as well just learn how to throw a high percentage strike like a closed fist strike, right? So if you say you're teaching open palm striking to mitigate the risk of danger of breaking your hand, well, you're actually increasing the risk, but now moving it from the wrist and the knuckle bones and putting it on the finger. So there's another strike against the open palm strike. Now, I do think it's important that I clarify, I'm talking specifically about people who substitute the jab and the cross with the open palm and the open palm. Because this is not a substitute for this. This was from people who don't want to train in fighting. They just want a quick fix solution to how fighting is supposed to work. But there is a window, there is an area where I think that open palm jab cross might be good. And that's by throwing a bad jab cross. What do we learn on the first day of martial arts training? When you throw a punch, you don't want to push through your target. You don't want to push through when you throw the punch. It is a whipping motion. I shove it out and bring it back in. Again, I'm here, one, and back in. Instead of trying to do that with the open palm, I want to push forward. Imagine this being my opponent's jaw. I take my heel palm and now I push his head back. That's a great way to open up your opponent for more subsequent strikes. Is that something you could do with a closed fist? Absolutely. But it's better when you have a wider surface area like the hand. So, instead of coming here to your little tombstone and going, yeah, 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 I think it's more effective that you work on pushing through your target and then implementing a much more useful weapon like a straight right, or as we're about to talk about, the slap.
But what about Boss Rutan, Rob? What about him?
What about Boss Rutan? Boss Rutan is one of the most well-trained martial artists in history, and his hands are the size of dinner plates. he competed in a sport that didn't allow closed fist striking. So he trained for hours upon hours to strike to the best of his ability with the open palm. And I'll let you know, he didn't only rely on straight punching with the open hand. A lot more of what Bas Rutten did was open palm hooking, meaning he was more closely resembling a slap. And that is where I think we can talk about open palm striking. Because this, I think, is pretty dumb. And if you do it, you're not learning how to fight, you're just learning how to patty kick. But this, I think, is one of the most devastating, underrated moves in all of martial arts. Yes, I think slapping is one of the most effective things you can do to someone, and it doesn't take very long to learn. But just in case you don't know what a slap looks like, I'm going to take my hand out here, turn through the hips, turn through the shoulder, and boom, there's my slap. There's really no way this doesn't hurt another human being. Go slap any fully grown, well-trained man across the face, and his immediate reaction, once he's done beating the piss out of you, will be to cry. Because the fact is, slaps are such strong percussive strikes that the body has no real response but to cry to them. And it's really funny seeing someone cry when they get hit with a slap. I really do believe the best way to teach an untrained person how to strike is by showing them how to slap. But I do think there are a few other options we could use that might work just as well in very specific scenarios. I'm talking right now about the knife hand. Now yes, we've all seen those videos where the misguided karate black belt walks into a fight with his hands down and goes, "Hoo-yah! Hoo-yah!" as a substitute for the jab cross, and that's just as wrong as the Krav Maga idiot going, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." But there is a time when the knife hand strike might be called for. And as with everything on this channel right now, I think it happens in the clinch. If I'm here with my opponent and we're wrestling around and I get a break, this is a good time to come in with that shooter knife. It's a very short range strike that can create a lot of power if you whip your hips right. Now specifically, I'm trying to target the neck, the temple, or the groin if you're one of those kind of people. Ultimately, the point that I'm trying to make here is if you have a very limited amount of time with someone and you're trying to teach them the most effective ways to defend themselves, I think you're actually doing them a huge disservice by saying, just go like this. It's just as good as throwing a straight right and left, and you don't have to spend half as much time practicing it. Everything comes down to how much you're willing to practice it. And that woman might go home and practice what you're teaching her for hours and hours and hours, and ultimately she'll end up wasting your time, because for half of that amount of time, she could learn how to throw a proper straight right and straight left and do much more damage to a potential attacker. But I also believe if you only have an hour to teach someone how to defend themselves, you're not really going to be teaching them anything useful that they can use to defend themselves. It can take a minimum of an hour just to get someone to throw a straight punch. And to get them to do it consistently will take way more time than that. Again, if you're watching this channel, you're probably a practicing martial artist and you know it took you a long time just to figure this part out. So imagine trying to do that in 1 hour. So I would say instead, just be honest with your client or whoever's taking your self-defense seminar that everything you're showing them is going to require them to practice. And instead of teaching them how to go, ha, ha, maybe explain how to de-escalate a situation. Maybe explain how to read a situation before it comes to the point of physical violence. And if we do get to the point where you have to defend yourself, teach them more useful weapons. Teach them how to grab onto someone and take them to the ground. It sounds kind of complicated, but honestly, an over-under body lock and a drop of dead weight will solve a lot of problems without you noticing it. And when it comes to striking, I would say again, teach the slap. Everyone kind of already knows how to do it, and it's very, very effective. So ultimately, I think if someone is trying to teach you how to go, yeah, 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 they're just fulfilling a power fantasy. They're not showing you the best tool for the best job. So don't do open palm striking. It looks pretty dumb, it's not very useful, and there are a whole bunch of other tools that are much cooler and much more useful to you. All that being said, if you feel like you learned something today, if you enjoyed this video, then please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. This has been Rob from Combat Self-Defense. I want to thank you guys for all the hard work. Thank you for the hard work yet to be done, and I'll see you next time.